Hey guys, it's Mr. Wilcox here, and I just kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about what the Quizlet was for computer programming for last week. I do realize that when you look at these, in my opinion, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I believe that this is all backwards because this one's maybe a little bit easier, but there's some of these that are a little bit hard, and I think that they put some of these a little bit backwards. But if I go from term to term, here, if I look at this first one, for blank, semicolon blank, and then blank. What we have called this, and this is kind of goes back to our first day of notes, is this first blank is what we call our initialization statement. This initializes our variable. So it might be like int a or int x, or it could be int x is equal to 6. And then this is going to say, okay, now it's going to be our test condition or a condition statement. This is going to say, okay, we're going to test this until x is, for every x value less than 16. And then they call this the iterative statement. I just kind of say that this is the finalization statement where it says, okay, now I'm going to do x plus plus or x minus minus, depending upon what kind of program you're trying to do. And then everything in here, I really haven't really talked about this. It's kind of like if you have an essay, it's like the body of the essay, the body of the essay or the paragraphs. So here it's going to be, this is the loop body. This is the body of the loop. This is where everything comes together, that it tells us what we need to do when. And so we say, okay, this is the initialization, condition, finalization, and then loop body. Okay. And in this loop body here, and this kind of goes with two.
Loop body.
Oops. In this loop body, statements, these are the statements that need to be executed multiple times given whatever is in this for loop. Okay. So whatever is in this for parentheses. Okay. And then here it says, okay, well, what of these blanks here declare and initialize the loop or a control variable? Well, we know that the initialization does. It's going to be an integer x. Or we're going to say, okay, we're going to deal with x's here. This is the initializing that x. It could be x equals 6, whatever it may be. So this part of the for loop here is what initializes the loop or the control variable. And then this one says increment or decrement the loop control variable. What increment and decrement is it really just is that x plus plus or x plus 3, x minus minus, x minus 2 is whatever that's going to be, and that's going to come in this very last statement. They call it, again, the iterative statement. I just like calling it the finalization statement because it finalizes the loop. And but yeah, okay. And again, this last part, it says, well, really what they did is they broke down each term and what they each does. So this test condition, makes the loop end. We're saying, okay, we're going to do this loop until x is less than 15. Once it hit x is less than 15, that stops the loop and we're done. So that's going to be this test condition right here, or this condition statement in the middle of the parentheses in this for loop. Okay. I believe that's all I need for the first one. Here it says, okay, which variable is the loop control variable? So in other words, what is controlling this loop? What variable is saying, okay, we're going to deal with this variable, and this variable tells us when we start and where we start and when we stop. And that variable is A, because we say we have here is...
Which variable is the loop control variable in the for loop below? 4.
Okay. So what it states is int a is equal to b, and we're going to do this until a is less than c, and then a pretty much just says a plus plus, or a is equal to a plus 1. So it's saying the a part is our loop control variable because that variable is what matters. That's what tells us where we start. It's going to start at this b variable, and it tells us when we're going to stop. It's going to stop when a is not less than c anymore. Okay. So this loop really is controlled solely on this a variable. This b tells me when I'm going to start, this c tells me when I'm going to stop, and this is telling me when how I'm going to increment my a. It's saying I'm going to add 1 to my a. Versus this one, how many times does this loop body execute in each of the loops below? So for int x is equal to 1, sorry, k is equal to 1, k is less than 5, k plus plus. Well, we know that this is going to happen 4 times. Oops. That is weird. I don't know why that did that. We know that this loop is, sorry. We know that this loop right here is going to do it 4 times. This is going to do it when k is equal to 1, and then it's going to say k plus plus. Now it's going to be k is equal to 2, run it again, k is equal to 3, run it again, k is equal to 4. But if we run it one more time, at the very end, k is going to be equal to 5, but 5 is no longer less than 5, so it's going to only run it 4 times. It's not going to run it that 5th time. It's going to stay at that 4. And very similarly here, it's going to start at 7, and it's going to go on to 6, because it's going to go k minus minus now. It's going to subtract 1 each time to k that we run this loop. So now it's going to be 7, then 6, then 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. And then once it runs one more time to hit 0, 0 is no longer greater than 0, so it will stop the loop and it will only execute it 7 times. Whereas this one, how many times does the loop body execute to each of the loops below? Okay, so int n is equal to 10, n is greater than or equal to 0, n minus equals 2. And so what this means, n minus equals 2, is we're, instead of incrementing it, going it down by 1, now we're going to go down by 2. And it's actually shown right in the flashcard right below it. And so what it's going to say, it's going to start at 10. That's the first one. Then it's going to subtract 2 of it. Then it's going to be 8, then 6, then 4, then 2. I believe this was an error. I think this should say 5 because once, oh, no. And then it's going to do it with 0. I forgot, because this is now n is greater than or equal to 0. So it's going to also run it when it's 0 because 0 is equal to 0. And then I can't subtract 2 one more time because now it doesn't, that doesn't satisfy this test condition because 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 is not greater than or equal to 0. So it's going to run it 6 times. Okay. And again, we've already talked about this. N minus equals 2 is really just saying, I'm going to take my n and subtract 2 to it each time, and then I'm going to be done. And very similar to it, n minus equals 3 is subtracting 3 each time, and so on and so forth. Okay. What I want you to do is try this one on your own and see if you can get this 7. So now instead of subtracting 2 each time, this one's going to be adding 3 each time to n. So it's going to start at 1, then 4, then 7, and so on. Okay, and I'm going to go over this question here, and I want to see if you can, actually, you know what? I believe you could probably do this one. Actually, no, I'm going to go over this one, this first one, and then I'm going to go over this third one. Okay, but every other one I want to see if you can try on your own. But for this first one, it says, okay, I'm going to take k is equal to 1. For k less than or equal to 25, k plus plus. And so it's going to say, okay, if k is able to mod 5, and if that mod 5 is equal to 0, so it's saying if 5 is a divisible of this number, because the mod is going to be equal to 0, that means there's no remainder, we're going to print out that k value. So here it's really just saying, whenever I get a multiple of 5, I'm going to just print that multiple out. So here it's going to start with 1. Well, 1 is 1 mod 5 equal to 0? Well, no, 1 mod 5 is equal to 1. So it's not going to print anything out, and it's going to add 1 to it. 2 mod 5 is not equal to 0. So I'm not going to print 2 out. It does not hit this statement because this if statement is false. And so it's going to move on and say check 3, check 4. Those also don't work. Check 5. Well, 5 mod 5 is in fact 0. Because I can say, okay, 5 divided by 5, that's just 1 with no remainder. So I'm going to print out 5 first, and that's how I get this 5. Then it's going to test 6. 6 mod 5, 6 divided by 5 is 1 and with a remainder of 1. So this does not work here. 6 does not work. So it's not going to print out 6. It's going to move to 7. 7 doesn't work. 8 doesn't work. 9 doesn't work. 10 does work. And then it's going to keep doing this until we get to 25. And again, all it really does is it just prints out the multiples of 5. Okay, but the last one I'm going to do is I am going to check this one right here. What is the output of the following code segment for int m is equal to 8, m is greater than or equal to 0, m minus minus. Okay, and what is it going to print out? Well, it's going to print out m. It's also going to print out a space, and then it's also going to print out m plus 1, and then it's going to print out another space. So it's going to print out m and m plus 1, really. So I'm going to check 8. Okay, is 8 greater than or equal to 0? Well, yes. So I'm going to print out 8. I'm going to print out 8 plus 1, which is 9. So this is how we get these first two statements. 8 printed it out, 9 printed it out, and then it's going to subtract 1 to it and say, okay, now m is 7. I'm going to print 7 out. I'm going to print out 7 plus 1. That's 8. And then it's going to subtract 1 to 7 to get 6. Do the same thing, 6 and 7, 5 and 6, 4 and 5, 3 and 4, 2 and 3, 1 and 2. And then it's going to print, it's going to eventually get to the point where it's going to say 0. Is 0 greater than or equal to 0? Well, yeah, 0 is equal to 0. So it's going to say, okay, it's going to print out 0, and it's going to print out 0 plus 1, which is 1. And then it's going to go to 0 minus minus, which is negative 1. And at this point, negative 1 does not work. Negative 1 is not greater than or equal to 0. So it's going to stop that for loop, and we're going to be done with that statement. Okay? I hope this helps with all of these flashcards, and I hope it makes some of these equal to a little bit easier. It says, what is 5 factorial? This really isn't all that important when it comes to this programming that we're talking about. Now, if you really care to know anything factorial, so 5 factorial is we start at that number, so we're going to start at 5, and we multiply every number all the way down until we hit 1. So 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 9 factorial is 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And so really here, it looks like it says 54,321, but really what it is there's multiplication happening in between here. And really 5 factorial is 5 times 4, which is 20, times 3, which is 60, times 2, which is 120, times 1, which is 120. So 5 factorial is really just 120. And numbers are, like I said, they're supposed to be multiplication in between here. Okay. But again, like I said, I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me or go use that message board. It really is helpful for me to know what works and what doesn't work. Thanks.